Thank you for tuning in to learn more about the science of business, and more specifically to learn how deploying the science of business in your business will help you make more money and reduce stress. How does that happen? Well, it happens because of the scientific method. The scientific method is about reducing uncertainty and removing confusion. It really does come down to appreciating that each business has a different set of dynamics and issues going on, and what you need to do is to remove the things that keep people from taking confident actions to improve sales, profits, and cash flow. That's ultimately what the business of science is doing. It does it by appreciating that every business is unique and that their current situation is a culmination of a lot of factors, some that are inside their control, others that are outside their control, but all of them are impacting the ability of that business to realize its goals. As a result, the science of business is about coming in and building solutions to problems unique to a business, not by coming in with a one-size-fits-all program or solution. Take a look at one of the big differences between a business scientist and a consultant. So a business scientist applies the science of business. They use the business scientific method to help assess and determine what's happening, what needs to be done. Whereas a consultant often is coming in with what I like to call a bag of tricks. They're things that they've used over time that have a pretty good probability of working. They've got great theory behind it. They can talk to it really well. But the challenge is, can they make it relevant? Making it relevant is more than just taking the materials used with client A, putting client D's logo on it, and then giving it to client D. It just isn't that simple when you're coming in trying to help a business owner. And that's why business scientists approach every engagement they have with the appreciation that that owner is cautious. They're reluctant to bring people into their business to let them take a look behind the curtain, yet they have problems to solve, and so they're looking for help. That's one thing a business scientist does. Another thing that a business scientist does is they mitigate client risk by looking for distinctive insights to the problems that business is having, particularly as it relates to control over results. Again, they're not coming in with an off-the-shelf solution nor academic theory that reads well and sounds good, but is difficult to apply and really not practical. What they're coming in really to improve the flow of money through a business. It starts with sales, and it's represented by cash flow, and what's left over is more than profits. It's actually cash reserves in the bank. So accounting is looking at the sales and the profits, whereas the science of business appreciates that, but what they're really anchoring on is how much of those sales sit over in our cash reserves. Because ultimately it's the cash, it's that operating cash that allows you to enjoy a better quality of life. Let's appreciate another element. Another element about a business scientist is they do recognize that businesses are unique. And as such, they won't jump in with an uninformed conclusion or make an unproven recommendation. They're going to ground themselves in the facts of the business. And yes, like a consultant, they're going to come in with their own knowledge and experiences. They're going to have opinions, perspective, that point of view. And they're also going to make assumptions. Assumptions are how we shortcut things to be able to move forward. But the difference between a business scientist and a consultant is a consultant will lead with this, whereas a business scientist will rely on their depth of experience. In other words, over the years, they've done an array of different things that have given them depth of experience in different areas, plus their breadth of experience. In other words, they've done these things across them, and so they're better able to see the connections, the interrelationships, how things come together to get things done. And they do this because the scientific method is all about solving business-specific problems through critical thinking, data collection, interpretation of that data, and then communication of findings, i.e. the conclusions and the solutions. This is what's referred to as the scientific method, and the scientific method is really anchored first by hypothesis. In other words, an observation's made, and now they're going to form a conclusion about that by doing research. And as they have their work with their hypothesis and apply their research, they're able to then draw conclusions. So think about it as 6 steps. And these steps are very interrelated, and they move in a sequence. And that sequence allows for that observation to be grounded in some facts. A hypothesis is formed, experiments are then done, where a conclusion is drawn against the experiment and the hypothesis. And if the experiment proves the hypothesis, it gets communicated. If it doesn't, the process starts over relative to revisiting the facts, because what's happened is that experiment generated a new set of facts that needs to be looked at in relation to the facts that helped form the hypothesis. And so this process continues until the conclusion is fact-driven. And so this is the scientific method. This is what scientists do in all kinds of different disciplines. And it's also a discipline that is applied to business. And so how does it apply to you? Well, it applies to you in that really the initial observation that a business scientist is coming into a business with, is this a good business to own, yes or no? That's the question. Because ultimately, good businesses, even more significantly, great businesses, people want to own them. Those that aren't, they don't. And so there's a few questions that are assessed in this observation phase. There's some data collected, i.e. what is already known. And really, this is about looking at the results of the business. One of the things that a business scientist appreciates is that a business is always trying to tell the management team and the ownership group what's the state of that business, what's working well, what isn't, where are the issues. The business is trying to tell them. And if they will pause and look at what's already known, they can get a pretty good sense of what's not working. They then based on this, that's the hypothesis. It's an educated theory about what's impinging on profits and cash flow. They'll then move into costing out the hypothesis. In other words, what's these issues costing the business by allowing them to go unaddressed. So they're going to cost out the hypothesis. Then they're going to draw some conclusions for this. And really the purpose of drawing conclusion is to identify, it's to really prioritize what problems to fix. Every business has limited resources, so it's not about coming in and just solving all the problems. It's about understanding where the biggest issues are, what are they costing, what's the solution for them. And that then allows you to, in essence, develop a plan to capture the value that gets created by solving these problems. And a big part of this is in this step. It's about really bringing a team together, and I like to refer to this as the ACRI model. In other words, who's accountable for solving this problem? Who's responsible for specific actions that need to be completed to solve that problem? And does anybody need to be consulted in this? In other words, they have some perspective, some insight that could help fix the problem, create the new results, and then who needs to be informed? The reason why this is such an important part of the scientific method is because ultimately you've got to communicate the findings, i.e., what have we learned and what are we going to do about it? Because when you effectively communicate, your needed changes have a better stickiness to them, and your desired results are more reoccurring. In other words, because you've gone through this method, it's not this temporary blip and we revert back to old ways. It's about allowing that hypothesis to get costed out and then prioritized, assigned to that project team, and then when things are moving forward, those that are impacted are informed and enrolled in what is to be done differently going forward. So really, these 6 steps are done against isolated problems, and you use them over and over again to make even more money. And the reason why you do that is because the science of business is really about helping businesses that aren't here. In other words, you want to be here, because if you were a thriving business, then you got 2 things going for you. In fact, this is how you know if a business is thriving or not. A business is thriving when the ownership of that business and its management team have the time to do what they want to do whenever they want to, plus they have the money to do it with. That's a thriving business. In other words, the currency of business is in ample supply. They have time. They have discretionary time that they get to invest in areas of interest or anything they want. They've got the money to fund those pursuits, and so what they really have is time or money. If this isn't the case for your business, in other words, you find yourself more in the surviving side of it. In other words, you never have enough time, nor do you have enough money, then the scientific method is for you. It will help you create better results. There'll be different results because you'll identify things that need to change. The other thing about how the scientific method benefits you is the primary goal of a business scientist is to transform businesses from surviving to thriving. And that isn't an art, it's a science. It's grounded in the facts of the business and in the evidence of improved results. And with that, think in terms of disciplined actions based on facts and proven principles, not by theory or practice. And what you're doing with these actions based on fact and principles is you're upgrading your strategy, your structure, your systems and standards. That's what you're ultimately doing. And as you do that, you'll have more management control over the inputs of a business. And those inputs are the wealth-producing resources that ownership has brought to the business. And they do this because one of the hardest things to do in business is to convert business assets, i.e. resources, into profits. And those who are typically in the stuck or surviving stage of business struggle with this. And their scenario is typically one where they've got resources and they've got money tied up in those resources, but they've got too much expenses relative to their sales, and as a result, their profits are less than what they should be. And how do you know this? Well, you know it through your financial statements. More specifically, your balance sheet. Your balance sheet is telling you what your mix is. In other words, who owns the assets? How much of the assets are owned by the creditors? How much are owned by the ownership of the business? Because remember, those those assets exist to do two things. They exist to increase sales and to be able to convert those sales into profits. So some of your assets exist to generate sales, and some of your assets exist to convert those sales into higher profits. And it's that profit, that net income, that actually comes back to the balance sheet and is representative of how well ownership is doing in maximizing their assets. And so you can always spot this, by the way, when you look at a business with negative retained earnings. That's a business that's not creating wealth, it's been destroying wealth because they've had losses come over here that subtract from retained earnings. This is the only point of linkage between the two statements, and it's an important point. But remember, it's driven by how well you're able to convert those assets into sales at a profit. So again, the science of business is there and ready to help you enjoy better results with less stress. It really does come down to identifying where your energy is now to solve problems that have been really pressing on you. And that's why here at Business CPR, we have two components in our business model. We have the Business CPR portion, which is really focused on profit conversion into cash from sales, and what we call good to great is really about owning a great business. And so think about it this way. Experience is a hard teacher. This is a quote from Vernon Law. He was a pitcher for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Vernon Law said, "Experience is a hard teacher because she gives the test first, the lesson afterwards." That's why they call it the School of Hard Knocks. The other thing to appreciate is that every business, yours included, has limited resources to make money with. And the more you put investments into your business and allow those investments decisions to be driven in the dark, the more likely you are to struggle with having having the dollars flowing in through price, receivables, the sales you make, greater than the costs incurred to generate those. Because if you do that, you have profits. And businesses that are making way too many decisions in the dark, this always comes by chance. Whereas businesses that really stop and think about things find themselves consistently improving their top line, consistently reducing their expenses, particularly as a percentage of that top line, so that they make more money. And it's in those profits where stress gets reduced, cash flow gets improved, resulting in cash reserves, which then really reduces stress. And so with that, think in terms of this. If you have uncertainty and stress around your assets, particularly if your creditors own more of your assets than you do, then take advantage of the science of business so that your mix is more like this. That's the goal. I love this quote from Yogi Berra. And Yogi had the saying, you don't have to swing hard to hit a home run. If you've got the timing right, it'll go. And so with that, your assets represent a great resource in your business. And I encourage you to think about, how well are those assets working for you? Are they working harder for you, or are you working harder for them? And if you're tired of working harder for your assets than they do with you, then reach out and learn more about how the science of business can help you. We've got more videos in this series in how we can help you. I encourage you to check them out. And I also wish to give you what I like to refer to as a really important principle. And that is that not everything that can be counted counts, nor everything that counts can be counted. And so again, come to our web, stay on our channel, look at our products and services to get an appreciation of what more we can do. And in conclusion, I really do. I wish you blue skies and clear roads ahead. Because if you've got that combination, the journey before you can be fantastic. Thanks again for tuning in to learn about the business of science. I look forward to joining you on one of our product and service videos, or better yet, reach out to us at business-cpr.com to learn more.